Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of former prolific NFL running back Ricky Williams. As many of you may know, especially sports fans out there, Ricky Williams is a former NFL running back and amassed a number of rushing yards in what I would say illustrious career. I mean, he had and now he's currently doing astrology charts. He's an astrologer actually now. So that's what I thought made this very compelling, doing a little analysis of his chart. So anyway, well, first thing off, Ricky Williams has his sun in Gemini, moon in Cancer, and a Virgo ascendant. Now, with the sun in Gemini, the basic wants can be connected with versatility, dexterity, talking a lot of communication, often about manifold subjects. And given that he has the moon in Cancer, perhaps a lot of this could be done with an emotional need and emotional security for those reasons, as far as the Gemini communication goes, and perhaps with people that he feels close to home with and family members. And looking at that, I mean, when you have the sun in Gemini, moon in Cancer, it sounds like a little bit of contradiction, but what it really is, I mean, the sun in Gemini, it's really about the basic wants, being communicative and certain sociability, talking about manifold subjects. It's more extroverted energy as far as the basic wants. So the basic want could be connected with versatility and shining and doing many different things, being very diversified. But the moon in Cancer, it's more of the emotional need for perhaps introversion and introspection, even in doing things in as far as activities that may center around the home. So that's really where you have that difference. But the fact he has a Virgo ascendant, I think, obviously flavors the Gemini want, and really what it does is, as far as the Gemini want, and often can be connected with outmaneuvering things, and with him being a former football player, outmaneuvering situations on the football field, the adversary known as the defense he's going up against on the opposing team, and doing so with the Virgo rising, doing so perhaps with a lot of strong analysis, being punctilious with details, and dissection, in this case dissecting NFL defenses. Now, looking at the chart, he has 7 of his 10 planets on the top half of the chart, which can suggest more extroversion and gregariousness over introversion and introspection, really being more objective as opposed to being subjective, and favoring optimism over pessimism, seeing the glass half full, so to speak, as opposed to seeing it half empty. He likely prefers a public life over a private one. Now, it's interesting, he's got half of his planets that fall on the left side of his chart, and he's got the other half on the right. So he's got 5 planets on the left side, 5 on the right. Now, this could show some vacillation and fluctuation between independence and self-reliance and dependence on others. Now, likely very balanced as far as doing things on his own and doing things collaboratively with others, but also having the ability to know when to ask for help and then when not to ask for help. Now, most of his planets fall in the 3rd quadrant of the chart, which of course consists of houses 7, 8, and 9. Now, this suggests an emphasis on relationships, significant other, intimate relationships, and also given that this is, and also the in-laws and extended family. Now, what also may be accentuated with that preponderance of energy in that 3rd quadrant of his chart are really perhaps connecting with others that may be able to help transform perhaps his philosophical outlook. Now, he has no planets in the 2nd quadrant of his chart, and the 2nd quadrant of a chart consists of houses 4, 5, and 6, the 4th, 5th, and 6th houses. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't emphasize family, love, or work-related matters at all, or he doesn't have the ability to work laboriously to provide for family and his children, if he does have any. I don't know if he has any or not. I don't remember, or I didn't research that. But the thing about that is, the thing of what it is that it may not be emphasized comparatively to other sectors in his chart. But the thing about that is what could modify that is the fact he has his moon in its dignity in Cancer and family-oriented Cancer, which could be, again, part of a very strong emotional need. Now, he also, in having the ascendant in very hard-working, industrious Virgo rising. So he is certainly someone, I believe, that definitely has potential and capability of working hard. And Virgo rising, of course, cannot just be industrious. They could be very punctual and reliable. And I'm sure he was for many of his football games during his NFL career. Now, he has 4 of the 12 major astrological influences in air signs. And when I'm talking about major astrological influences, what I'm referring to for me are the 10 planets, the MC, and the ascendant. Now, likely, he is a very good communicator, very communicative, probably very articulate, being able to understand concepts and assimilate ideas very readily, and could give, and this, a lot of this energy being in air signs could give very strong intellectual ability, and perhaps he's somebody that is very idea oriented. Now, the majority of his astrological influences fall in mutable signs. Now, this suggests he is likely to make the most compromises in relationships, is able to acquiesce very often to what others may want, and can be very adaptable, pliable, and also can have the ability perhaps to make the best out of adverse circumstances. Now, the final or chart signature is Gemini. Now, having that chart signature in Gemini, I mean, the chart signature in chart is supposed to give an overall tone or feel to one's natal chart. But at least to me, in my opinion, I don't think it supersedes the sun, moon, or ascendant in terms of its impact astrologically on the chart. But this can simply, the fact that he has this in Gemini, can reinforce and reaffirm this Gemini energy that exists. And this could give, I mean, given it's supposed to be the overall tone or feel to the chart, his general nature can be very whimsical, vivacious, spirited, loquacious, very versatile, being able to talk about a wide divergence of subjects, but may lack certain persistence, but being able also to assimilate a lot of information really in a very short time, doing things very quickly. The thing also too is in his chart ruler, which is Mercury, is in Taurus and falls in his 8th house. Now, this suggests that this is the sector where a lot of his Virgo rising energy is injected into. There could be a strong interest then on transformation, dealing with crisis matters, intimate relationships, shared resources, and also giving and receiving moral, monetary, and emotional support. And also, given that Mercury is also a singleton planet in his chart, it's the only planet in an Earth sign. This could put much more emphasis and accentuation on that energy. The fact that it's Mercury and Taurus in the 8th house. This could be very strong emphasis on that formulation of financial ideas that could really that can be really tied into some kind of transformation in his life that could lead to making some kind of major change or transformation. Now, also in the mind being also motivated toward generating income, which could be tied in to maybe why he's doing the astrology right now and making money by doing that. Now, also, another thing about his chart is that what I've noticed, I mean, him, I want to talk a little bit more about that Mercury and Taurus in the 8th. This could be where he might have done a lot of his learning, perhaps assimilating information, perhaps through things being demonstrated visually, such as maybe seeing things on YouTube or through videos or through some filmography, perhaps. And learning, Mercury and Taurus, maybe learning a little bit more methodically and deliberately, as opposed to the typical Sun and Gemini person. But anyway, another thing I want to talk about in his chart is that Ricky Williams has a cardinal T-square configuration. Now, when you have a cardinal T-square configuration, this could make a person very exceptionally action-oriented, activity-oriented, and it could give, cardinal, when you're talking about T-square configurations, can be difficult. They can give certain valor, courage, and fortitude. And it's really, especially perhaps in the cardinal signs, very action-oriented. But it could also, given that it's in cardinal, it could really indicate a lot of impatience, impetuous energy, being very hurried to start a lot of projects, sometimes simultaneously. But anyway, hold on a minute, people. Sorry about that. Anyway, but as far as his, as far as the cardinal T-square goes, on the negative side, sometimes it could give unnecessary, confrontations or certain disputes, because it can give a lot of tension and exasperation. But going back to, looking at his specific cardinal T-square configuration, he has, it consists of Pluto in the first house, making an opposition to a Venus-Mars in Aries conjunction in the 7th house. Now, given that it is doing that, well, the thing about that is, and it's also not only is making that opposition, I wanted to say as well, it is squared by the moon in Cancer in the 10th house. I'm sorry, I gotta rewind, people. It's the Pluto. Let me go back. I gotta rewind on this one more time. His cardinal T-square configuration, again, actually it's Pluto in the first house making an opposition to the Venus-Mars and Aries conjunction in the 8th house, and those points are squared by the moon in Cancer in the 10th house, which of course that is the focal point of the T-square configuration. And the focal point of a T-square configuration could be that point of overemphasis and accentuation. Now, the way this works with him, when you look at the fact that he has, the Pluto in the first opposing that Venus-Mars conjunction in the 8th. This indicates to me, at least how I see it, there's manifold ways of interpreting this, but Pluto in the first could give some power and give that intensity toward the self-interest, toward matters pertaining towards self. But when you have that making the opposition to that Venus-Mars and Aries conjunction in the 8th house, this could be more about maybe doing things perhaps for others in an intimate type relationship or sexual relationships. So it shows that it could be a tug of war between having power towards self-interest and injecting and doing things for the self with a lot of intensity, and going and trying to do things, really putting a lot of energy into doing things perhaps in a shared resources situation, or doing or perhaps even giving emotional moral support, the enjoyment of putting energy into that kind of emotional, moral, or even monetary support in a very assertive and aggressive Aries manner. But the fact that you have that Cancer moon making being that focal point of it, that's when you have that midpoint, or I should say not midpoint, but the focal point of that T-square, of that opposition, that indicates that's that point of that over accentuation, overemphasis. And because it's the moon in Cancer in the 10th, that could be where he could be trying to reconcile that opposition, and by doing so, perhaps maybe doing something, being in the public eye, where he could be that nurturer or that healer, where he is getting some kind of recognition from. So it's really about where he attains power in himself, and also being able to help out and reach out to others as well. Because Mars conjunct Venus, that could be about putting energy into relationships. So I think when in being the 8th house, that's the shared resources. This could be where he's actually able to go out and be able to do things really that kind of satisfy his own need, giving himself his power in some degree, and also doing something where he could be reaching out with that really with that energy and that really giving that support to others perhaps, and by doing so right now through astrology. And I'm going to get in this chart, he has a number of elements in his chart. There's a lot of astrological energy which indicates that he could be very proficient in the subject of astrology. Now going to this now, first off, I mean, he has 3 planets in his 8th house, which the 8th house, I mean, could be connected with the occult, supernatural, could include astrology. He also, and one of those planets is one of his 8th house, is the 8th house ruler actually that falls in it. But anyway, another thing too is that he has Pluto conjunct his 2nd house cusp of income, and Pluto can be connected with the supernatural, the occult, which can include astrology. So there's strong potential for income through this. Now also, he has the 10th house of his career in the 8th house, which again associated with the supernatural, occult, and astrology. He has Uranus in Scorpio in his 2nd house of income generated. Now that could give an unusual ability for occult, supernatural matters, including astrology, and making money through that. And also he has Aquarius on his 6th house cusp. That could indicate work through esoteric subjects, which again can include astrology. Now another indicator he has to being proficient in astrology is that one of the rulers of his 6th house, Saturn, falls in the 11th house, and the 11th house can be associated with astrology. Being that it's Saturn in Leo, that could give recognition and exposure in this through very laborious, hard work connected with that. Now also he has, on top of that, he has the ruler of his 2nd house of income, which falls in the 8th house of the occult, supernatural, and astrology. He has Neptune in the 3rd house, which could give a good speaker on the metaphysical, which again includes astrology. His ruler of his 12th house of the metaphysical falls in the 9th house of higher education. Renowned astrologer Stephen Forrest had stated, I don't remember the exact quote, but something to the effect that Ricky Williams he felt he became proficient in astrology very quickly, and that's of course very high praise from, a renowned astrologer. Very well recognized by many as one of the best astrologers out there. Prolific astrologer. Now, Ricky Williams, another thing that could indicate his quick learning ability, of course, that Ricky Williams, again, does have his sun in adroit Gemini, and obviously Gemini can have an ability to assimilate a lot of information in a very short period. Another thing, too, I wanted to talk about Ricky Williams is now going to his athletic prowess and ability. He has a grand fire trine configuration. Imagine that, consisting of Neptune and Sagittarius conjunct the 4th house cusp, Mars and Venus conjunction in Aries in the 8th house cusp, and Saturn and Leo in the 11th house. Now, of grand fire trine configurations can often give inordinate athletic ability if one chooses to go that route. It could also give a lot of exuberance, passion, enthusiasm, and leadership prowess and natural ability in these things, as long as one doesn't become complacent. Now, the Neptune and Sagittarius conjunct the 4th house cusp, that could be about sports fantasies he is at home with, which is attempted to become a reality. Sports dreams perhaps may be coming true. Also, with the Venus-Mars conjunction in Aries in the 8th, that could be very enamored in enjoyment of volatile sports competition. And being in the 8th, well, how can that manifest? Well, crisis related, the 8th house is connected with crisis. Now, when you apply that, how does that work with sports? Well, such as being down and being down to a team, coming back from adversity, whether it might be an injury or whether it might be connected with maybe trailing a team with little time left on the clock. That's how that could manifest, I think. And also Saturn in Leo in the 11th house, that could show laborious work and attaining notoriety and attention and recognition, perhaps in an aspiration group related thing, and in this case connected with sports. The fact that you have all these energies in that grand fire trine configuration, they could all work very well and cohesively together. Now, last but not least, I wanted to talk about the fact he has Jupiter in Gemini making a conjunction to his Gemini MC. This could be very fortuitous and very lucky and fortunate for expressing versatility and doing a wide divergence of things and manifold things that are career related, and that one could get perhaps notoriety and success through this. So it wouldn't surprise me if he actually does other things, maybe at some point in addition, maybe at some point after, if he stops doing the astrology at one point, I could see him venturing off and being very talented and being able to do other things in a very proficient manner. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for my natal chart analysis of former NFL running back Ricky Williams. Stay tuned next time, where I am going to be talking about Mercury at the 29th degree in astrology. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.